Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast, in which we talk about all things family, specifically the way we build families and the way we each individually define who is in our family. I'm Julia. I'm a solo mom by choice, and I love talking about our family units. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Alison Prato. Allie is one of the original expanders in the infertility world. What I mean by that is for so long, infertility and fertility journeys were something that were taboo to talk about. Not a lot of people shared their experiences. More than that, there really weren't a lot of places to share your experiences. And recently, there's been this rise of podcasts talking about infertility journeys and providing educational resources about fertility and communities that provide access to other people going through it. And Allie was one of the founders of that movement. She has a podcast called Infertile AF, and she runs something called Fertility Rally, which convenes a lot of the great thinkers, doctors, educational resources to the infertility world. And you can participate online in these experiences, these conferences where you learn all about infertility. So I'm thrilled to have Allie here today. She's going to share how her fertility journey went, what caused her or what prompted her to start Infertile AF and to start Fertility Rally, and the resources they provide to others. But what's really interesting in the infertility world is we often just talk about the beginnings of our family, how they're started, how they're generated, going through the fertility ups and downs. And we forget that once a family is created, however you choose to define your family creation story, that family exists as an entity, as a unit that evolves over time. And Allie is going to share with us, in addition to her infertility story, her story of losing her mom and how that's really shaped her and how it's shaped her family unit. And I'm so grateful for Allie sharing this part of her story, in part because it's really fresh. It just recently happened. And in part because it reminds us that our family units are just organic and they're going to continue to evolve. And we need to continue to think about each moment in time, what family means to us and how we are evolving alongside our families. So without further ado, here's Allie. If you love the episode as much as I think you will, don't forget to do two things. Share it with a friend who might benefit from it, and sign up for the Stork'd newsletter. It's called Let's Start a Family, and it's on Substack, and that's where we talk about all things family and fertility in real time, specifically whatever is going on that's newsworthy and noteworthy. Here's Allie. Enjoy. Allie, welcome to Stork'd.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Julia.
This is a podcast that talks about all the things related to our family lives, including how we choose to define them and how they came to be. You are somebody who is this voice in the fertility, infertility community that has made such an impact on so many people. So I want to hear a lot about your story and how you got to a point where you were contributing in the ways that you're contributing. Do you mind first doing an introduction for who you are, and then we'll dive into some of the details?
So I'm Alison Prato. I'm a journalist, a mom of two, and a dog mom, a wife. I have a podcast called Infertile AF that I started in 2019. I also co-founded a fertility community called Fertility Rally that started in June of 2020. And I think that the gist of it is just, I realized, I hope this doesn't sound nerdy, but I think I'm just a storyteller. I like to share people's stories. I did it in my magazine career. I worked in magazines for 20 years and loved to talk about not just celebrity interviews, but I love to write profiles on interesting people that were doing interesting things. So I've always just been drawn to other people and other people's stories.
I love that. And a podcast is so much a profile about somebody. It's a snapshot into their life.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an artistry about storytelling. I think it can be misinterpreted that you're just sharing something exactly as it's laid out, but helping somebody articulate what they're going through is really takes talent. So it's a form of journalism that I think should be celebrated more.
I love it. I've before I even started the podcast, I was really into listening to other podcasts, and there weren't a ton at the time. Not that I'm super groundbreaking, but in 2019, there was a fraction of the number that there are now. But yeah, I listen to podcasts as I fall asleep. I wake up and they're still playing in my ear. It's probably not the best thing for my brain, but I just love hearing about other people's stories no matter what they're going through.
And I think I'm actually going to use that word groundbreaking and allow that to be a truism for your work, because what you hear so often in the community of people who are trying to conceive is that they feel very isolated and alone. And a lot of the resources that are available to help somebody, maybe it's a fertility clinic, maybe it's an OBGYN, maybe it's a fertility coach, maybe it's a book or this or that, get really expensive.
Mm.
And what's important about programs like yours, both the Fertility Rally and the podcast, is that they're affordable ways to feel less isolated, less alone, because you're exhibiting or demonstrating what's happening in the fertility world by storytelling. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I guess so. The podcast is obviously completely free. You can listen to it wherever. Fertility Rally is a membership community because we do a lot of support groups and we have private Facebook groups and things like that. So we do have a really we try to keep it super affordable because we know that anybody that's in the infertility community is strapped for cash. We get it. It's really inexpensive if you are able to take advantage of all the things that Fertility Rally has to offer. But we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about what brought you to the fertility space in general and compelled you to take your storytelling talents to this environment. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I married my high school sweetheart, Vince, which sounds so nerdy, but we always say that we went to 2 different colleges, so we boned other people. Sorry, can I talk like that?
Oh, of course you can. And I think it's important. Yeah.
Okay. So we started dating when we were 16 and we were in love. We really were, but we did go to different colleges and we knew that it was silly to be 18 and strapped down to some long distance boyfriend, girlfriend. So we decided to break up, but still visit each other sometimes during college. All of this to say that most of our beginning of our career was trying not to get pregnant. Once we started having sex, because I talk about this on my show a lot, all I knew growing up about sex education was like, if you don't use a condom and you have sex, you're going to get pregnant. That was drilled into my head. I had no idea. We never learned the nuances or the granular stuff about reproduction and fertility. And it was like, here's how to put a condom on a banana. And if you don't use a condom, you're going to get pregnant. That was literally all they told us. We're working to change that now. And I think hopefully I have a 14-year-old daughter who's a freshman in high school. And I think that she's getting a better education. She also hears me talking about this stuff all the time. So hopefully it's through osmosis. She's learning a bit more. But we didn't start to try to have kids until long after Vince and I had gotten married. So I was in my 30s before we even started trying to have kids. We'd been together for almost like 20 years, which is wild. And I did get pregnant with my daughter, naturally, no assisted reproductive technology, when I was 34. And then we had just moved to New York a couple of years prior. We didn't really have that many people that we were friends with that had kids, because in a city like New York, people just put it off. It's very career driven.
Yeah.
We just weren't running with a crowd that had kids. So when I had my daughter, it was like I was one of the first people in our friend group to have kids. Although all my friends back in Chicago, where we were originally from, that I had gone to college with, that were my same exact age, were starting to have babies. So it's interesting, like depending on your location, it affects your fertility, or at least it did for me.
That's true. There's 2 pieces of research that indicate that. There's some maps that you can look at, which is the average age of the first baby. And you can see in the Northeast in California, it's late 30s, and everywhere else, it's like mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
And then there's some research. I'm going to get it wrong, but there's like a cohort mentality around if everyone is doing it, you're likely to do it too. They call it like a contagion, even though it's not contagious, which sounds so weird. But yeah, it's like social contagion. What norms become normal for you?
Yeah. And I've always said, if we hadn't moved from Chicago when I was about to turn 30, we probably would have had kids sooner. And I probably wouldn't have had infertility issues because mine were directly a result of my age. So it's interesting that fork in the road really took me down a totally different path into a totally different career. None of this stuff would have happened had we never moved out east, which is interesting. But back to the story, and I'll keep it brief. We didn't start for our second kid until I was like 38 because I just didn't know, again, much about my fertility or infertility or what happened as you got older. I really didn't know about like egg quality diminishing as you got older, none of this stuff. And I feel like a total idiot admitting that because it seems so silly, but I just didn't know. I was looking to Hollywood because I was working in that field, interviewing celebrities and stuff for magazines. And it was like, oh, Halle Berry just had a baby at 46, or so-and-so is,
Yes.
having babies later and later. And there wasn't a lot of talk about what was actually happening behind the scenes, whether they were doing IVF or using a surrogate or whatever it may be. I just thought you can have babies whenever you want, and we're not ready yet for number 2. So it was a rude awakening when we did start to try for the second baby, and I had 4 miscarriages like in a row.
Oof.
Like, what is happening? And we finally, I'm not laughing. It was devastating. I'm enough removed to it now that it's not, I don't sob every time I think about it or talk about it. It was really hard. It was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of friends who had had 1 miscarriage, but not a lot of friends that had had multiple. So I was like thrown into this weird chunk of demographic where I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't have anybody that I could really talk to about it. I wasn't really on Instagram yet. This was like 2010, maybe. I wasn't really, there weren't a lot of podcasts. There weren't a lot of books. I remember going to the bookstore looking for books about miscarriage, and there was like a 2-inch section on the bookshelves at Barnes and Noble.
Wow.
Really? Like, no one's talking about this.
Disappointing. And what were your doctors doing? Like, presumably you were seeing an OBGYN at the time. Was there any commentary from the medical world?
No, and I hadn't gone to see a specialist yet, or a reproductive endocrinologist, which I did finally do after my 4th miscarriage. But I didn't go see my OB. Like, that's how, I guess, not proactive I was. I was just like, what's happening? And it was all like happening really quickly. It was like back to back to back to back. But I finally did talk to some friends, like a friend of a friend that had gone through IVF. And I still didn't really know what IVF was. I thought it was like when you wanted to have multiple babies, which is so stupid of me. I believe I didn't know anything about it.
No, because I absolutely do believe, because in my teenage and 20 years, there was the Octomom show and like all these things about having multiple babies.
That's what I thought. I've said that before, and I hope it doesn't sound so dumb, but I was like, oh, Octomom, I don't want to have 8 babies. Like, I thought IVF was like optional and you did it to like, not for fun, but just to have your family in a different day. I really didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
And I'll take one for the team and look like an idiot, but it's true. But when I finally did see Dr. Klein, who ended up being my doctor for IVF, and he's wonderful, Joshua Klein, he's now at Extend Fertility. At the time, he was at RMA in New York, but he did a workup and he was like, you know what? You're the perfect candidate for IVF because you've got a lot of eggs. Like, I had a healthy egg reserve, but I didn't have a lot of good quality eggs. And he explained to me, you need a good quality egg and good quality sperm to make a healthy embryo. And what's been happening is the sperm has been meeting these unhealthy eggs. And that's why you've been having miscarriages, because they're not healthy embryos. And I was like mind blown, like, what? No one's ever talked to me about this. I don't even know what you're talking about right now. But he explained it in a really palatable way. And he was like, yeah, all we have to do is find the right healthy egg and match it up with your husband's healthy sperm, and you should be good to go. That was my introduction to IVF. And I was like, okay, let's go.
It goes back to the banana condom situation, right? This is basic science. It doesn't have anything uncomfortable talking about sex, which I know a lot of teachers just don't have a lot of comfort teaching. And it also doesn't have any icky religious components, which is complicated in a lot of educational situations. It's really just science. There's an egg, there's a sperm, they have to meet, they have to be healthy, and sometimes things like miscarriage happens. I wish we were teaching these things in school.
I know. And, I remember him saying to me, your body is actually doing the right thing because it's getting rid of these unhealthy pregnancies. And that was a really interesting way to put it too, because I was like, a lot of times when you're not able to have a healthy pregnancy or have a baby, you feel broken or you feel like damaged goods or something like that. So the way that he framed it was like, your body's actually doing what's right, and it will do what's right if we can find this healthy embryo. So
that's good framing, but it's so hard to hear in some ways, because on one hand, you're saying, okay, this is it's a good thing. But on the other hand, I think a lot of us have had the situation where somebody is mistakenly trying to be kind and they say, at least you're not having an unhealthy baby, or at least your body did the right thing. And so the positivity can be really helpful in framing it, but it can also feel very toxic if you're telling somebody you should be happy that you're not carrying an unhealthy embryo. Miscarriage conversations can be so rife with misunderstanding.
Yes, exactly. And just to clarify, he wasn't being like toxic positivity. He was just explaining it. But I agree with you. And I don't think that you should ever say at least anything when
Right.
someone's telling you about their fertility struggles, because it really diminishes the pain and the trauma and the grief and everything, the experience for people. And again, that was a learning experience for me. I didn't know that until I got into this world and have now talked to thousands of people about it.
Totally. Like, how many times did I say at least to somebody? And you can go the other way too. You can be so cautious about not hurting somebody's feelings that you don't say anything. And what you really needed was a friend to say, go see a doctor.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. We did get lucky though. I've talked about this ad nauseum on my show and stuff, but my husband and I were really having a hard time relationship wise when we were going through all this stuff, because we had our daughter and it was tricky. And he saw me in so much pain mentally, more so than physically, just wanting this second baby and not being able to stop and doing everything I could. And it wasn't working. And I was so depressed and we were fighting and it was just really terrible. And I talk about that because, again, I want to normalize the conversation. People know that infertility is really hard on a marriage and a relationship. And if you're one of those people that's going through it and you have a partner and you're like, no, my partner and I bonded together and it brought us together and made us stronger, like, more power to you. Like, I appreciate that, but that was not how we were at all. We were like the opposite. Like, at one point we were like, are we going to get divorced? Like, maybe. It was bad. It was hard.
And what did you guys do? You reached out to Dr. Klein and you had his support on the medical side, but what did you do to support yourself or your relationship on the emotional side?
I started going to therapy and my therapist was amazing. And I just felt if I hadn't found her, I don't know if I could have made it through, because she really helped me frame the situation and try to like understand his side of it. It wasn't that he didn't want a second baby. It was like he just didn't want, what are we putting ourselves through? It's not happening. Let's just be happy with what we have. And I do get that now. But I was like, I will not stop and I don't feel complete. And it was like this, I've never felt so strongly about something that I wanted this second baby so badly. But she did get us to a point, because it was months and months of trying and it not happening, that she got me mentally to a point where if we were a family of 3 and we hadn't had Sonny, our son, that we eventually did have through IVF, it would have been okay. And I think that's what I needed, was just like, it's going to be okay either way. I needed somebody to help me frame that. And she did. But we actually did end up getting the one healthy embryo. We had 5 that went for genetic testing. We did 1 round of IVF because that was all we could afford. That was all our marriage was going to be able to handle. We both agreed, like, we're doing this Hail Mary, 1 shot. If it doesn't work, okay, we did everything we could. I was totally at peace with that. But we did get so lucky. And now I'm like starting to cry.
Oh, I love it.
It worked. And it's crazy to me in retrospect. I can't believe it did work, because the percentages of all the things lining up that had to line up were pretty small and pretty low. And we just had this 1 embryo. We did the 1 transfer and it stuck. And thank God I had my baby.
You say you didn't really know what IVF was all about. And when people ask me about fertility treatments and fertility and IVF in particular, I always say it's like a lot of science and a little bit of magic.
Totally.
Like, there's just something miraculous and magical when it works. And when it doesn't work, it's like the statistics and science can't really account for it either.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, my heart breaks for anybody who has gone through this. I don't want to quantify. I think going through it once, going through it 10 times, it's all hard. But anybody who's gone through it and it hasn't worked, my heart just breaks so hard, because this is the one area where you can do all of the things. You can do everything, quote unquote, right and by the book. And it's still sometimes you don't have the outcome that you want. And that is so beyond frustrating and beyond sad and beyond devastating. And there's not that many other things where the effort doesn't equate to the result. Like, it's just breaks my heart when, we have these Fertility Rally members who have been going through this for years, and they've had all the surgeries and all the tests and all the things and all the supplements and consultations and they go through another retrieval or transfer, and it doesn't work. And I'm just like, and the doctors are like, I don't know. And it's so hard. There's no exact science to this. And that's part of the thing that's so frustrating.
It's so hard. And you're right. There's no control over the outcomes. We live in a culture in the US, at least, where we're taught that if you just work harder at something, it might come together.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases where it's not the case. Dating is that way too. My single friends who really want to meet a partner, you can go on all the apps, you can try all the things,
right,
and it may not work out.
Yeah.
And there's so few things in life that if you just don't like do the next step or apply yourself a little harder, something won't come to fruition.
And I think it's important to remind people and remind myself too, because I don't know really anything. I feel like I've just scratched the surface about all this stuff. Is IVF is new. It's only like 40 something years old. And the doctors are still learning themselves. And there's things that were happening at the beginning when this was first invented that you look back and you're like, wow, that they're not doing now. There's tests that probably are happening now that 10 years from now will be like, why were we doing that? You know what I mean? It's still,
Totally.
It's an evolving science and medical field, and it's fascinating. But even the doctors will admit sometimes, I don't know why it didn't work. We did do all the things, and sometimes you just gotta get lucky. And that's not when you want a baby and that's the answer. It's no, that does not feel good.
I absolutely do know. And I also know that it makes it hard to talk to friends who are going through it or who are not going through it. And it's hard to talk to your partner because you're basically just waiting around for luck or lightning to strike. And it may or may not strike. And how do you have those conversations? How do you have a conversation with somebody who's in the trenches with you and they're also going through fertility treatments and then lightning strikes for them? Or it strikes for you and it hasn't struck for them.
There's so much survivor's guilt that happens to people. Like in Fertility Rally, we have about 400 active members at any given time. People come and go based on treatment and having babies or not or whatever. And we have support groups, and everybody's like a family. Speaking of families, chosen family or not chosen family, because nobody really wants to be here.
Yeah.
But point being, going back to what you just said, is there's a lot of people who have been in the trenches together, and then somebody does get pregnant and they're like, I don't know how to tell the group, or I feel guilty. And that's so normal and valid, but it's also, you don't want them to feel that way because that really robs you of joy. But there's survivor's guilt for people that have gone through infertility that have had a successful pregnancy or birth. So it's tricky. It's so complicated.
Well, I really appreciate the position you're in as somebody who has experienced this and has created a community to talk about these things. I imagine that gives you insight into current trends in the fertility world and what people are currently experiencing and maybe where the fertility world might be headed. Can you share a little bit about that from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. There's, like I said, all these members, and we're on these support group calls. My co-founder Blair and I host a Wednesday night support group every Wednesday, and we have been since we launched in June of 2020, every single week. It's like one of the highlights of my week because it's always a rotating group of people depending on what's going on in people's lives, but it's a safe space where people can talk about everything. And it has been interesting to see, even over the past almost 4 years now that we've been doing this, tests that have gone out of favor that people were doing 4 years ago, things that they're doing now that are a little more cutting edge or groundbreaking that is still new, specifically PRP, which is like plasma rich testing stuff, or gosh, I'm going to screw it up.
Yeah, the PRP is like when you take your blood and you spin it so that the doctor does something to it to make it like more rich in plasma. Then they inject it back into your uterus to make theoretically your uterus better.
Yeah, trying to make a more healthy environment for an embryo to implant and grow, things like that. It's been really cool. And one of the things that we also do through Fertility Rally is we do Fertility Rally live twice a year. So we have one every April and every October where it's a day, it's all on not Zoom, but it's all virtual. And we talk to experts in the field and people in our community and speakers. And we always have breakout sessions on very niche down topics. So like we did one all about PRP. We've done one all about genetic testing with an embryologist. We have panels with expert doctors, and they talk about all the groundbreaking stuff and all the changes that have happened. And that's always really fascinating. And like I said, I still feel like I don't know anything about any of it because it's like there's so much to know and to learn, and it's constantly changing. But it's been really cool to see that overall, anybody in this medical field that's working in fertility is so passionate about what they do, and they really want to help people. And that's been really cool to meet all these really brilliant medical professionals and embryologists and doctors and clinicians and phlebotomists. What's the word? The people that take your blood.
Phlebotomists. Yeah.
Phlebotomists.
Yeah.
All those nurses, our tagline for Fertility Rally is it's the worst club with the best members. And I feel like that's how the medical part side of it is too. These are just the best of the best that really want to help people achieve their goals. And when it works out, and when there's some sort of breakthrough in the medical community or something, it's really cool to see that and celebrate that and see them implementing it into their protocols and stuff like that.
Yeah, the impact is so huge. Like small advances make a huge impact. And in terms of the conversations that your members are having, obviously those are confidential, but are there some trends in the emotional experiences or the lived experiences of the members that come up week to week?
Yeah, there's a lot of it's a big roller coaster ride, right? We have these calls, and there's anywhere between probably 20 and 40 women on our Wednesday night calls. And you don't have to share if you don't want to. You don't have to be on camera. You can just listen in. The trends are good and bad. It's people sharing good news and little wins. And maybe it's someone that's on their 5th retrieval and they got a good number of eggs and that they're maturing and the attrition rate is not super high. Or then it's somebody that had a transfer and it didn't work and they are crying and everyone's commiserating with them. It's really just, if I had to say a trend, it would just be like, it's just real talk about all the things. It's people saying things like, my sister got pregnant without even trying, and I met the baby and I know it's my niece, but I didn't like it. I didn't want to go, and it was hard, and I cried in the bathroom. Stuff like that you might not be able to say in mixed company or like in other groups. Like we always say, we're here for all of it. We get it. There's, for whatever you're going through, there's at least multiple people that have gone through something similar. We just want people to feel comfortable and safe. And I remember like at the beginning, people be like, am I an asshole if I say that I don't want to go to my best friend's baby shower? And everyone's like, no, we get that. You don't have to, you're not an asshole. That's human. So it's just a place where other people that have been through similar things come and help each other out and cheer each other on and hold each other's hands, basically.
I bet you hear a lot of advice or supportive comments in that context.
Yeah, we do IRL events too. So like this past summer, we did an event in Chicago where there was about 35 people that came. And now like all those people that were there at the Fertility Rally IRL are like best friends, and they like go on summer trips together and they meet up in these cities. And it's just been very cool that like normally a group of women that might not have all that much in common. It's all different ages, it's all different backgrounds, but they do have this one thing in common, and it's infertility or building their families through ART. And that bond is unbreakable.
Yeah, it's unite against the common enemy, which is this infertility experience or this fertility experience. Has there been anything that somebody has said to you or said in this group context that you said, wow, this is an incredible way to look at the experience of going through ART?
There's a lot of funny comments. Sometimes people just will say stuff, and like somebody the other day was saying, I found out that this bad news happened and it was like the garage door shut on my foot, and everyone was like constantly laughing. And I was like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
It's more of just people like expressing themselves and going through all these really traumatic things. But there's a lot of humor behind it in our too, because it's like you have to laugh or else you're just going to be a puddle. on the floor sometimes. So we don't take ourselves too seriously.
When you're describing this, what I'm thinking about, you've used words like human and relatable or authentic. What I get is this sense that in the fertility space, you're doing so many things that are medical, they're scientific. You have to make difficult decisions in real time. And to have a space where you can just be yourself and just be real about it, just be like whatever your emotional experiences in the moment, just live that feels really refreshing.
Totally. And we always say like bras are optional. I never wear a bra. At the beginning, when it was like everybody was Zooming with everything before we were doing IRL events, we would always joke and be like, I know everything about your vagina, but I've never seen your legs. Like it was like just because does get so intimate. But there's something about this, like I said, the instant bond of going through wanting to have a baby and not being able to have one or things along those lines that it really just draws people together and the guards go down and you're just like, this is me. And it's not pretty sometimes. But everybody's accepted and that it feels good. I think that's why I like the group so much is like, I always walk away feeling like that was great. You know, it might have been really sad and it might have been hard, but it was at the end of the day, it's like these people are here for each other and that's really cool.
So you're in these spaces where you're helping people in these very vulnerable moments. You're creating a safe space for them. You're holding space for them. And what the vulnerability is around creating a family, right? It's about this vision for what we want our family lives to look like and the gap between what it should look like in our heads and what it actually look like. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you define family, what family means to you? What does this word mean?
I love that. Obviously, there's like your family that you're born with, right? But I think that even more so now, it's the family that you choose. It's the people that you choose to be around you that you call family. I have so many friends who I consider family, stronger bonds almost than some of my blood relatives. So I think that it's cool. Like we're in a cool time right now societally about family can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be X, Y, and Z. It can be people who you work with or people that you meet on Instagram that have become your best friends. It can be someone you meet through an interview and then you keep in touch. Like I think to me, the more the merrier. I love that I do have my blood relatives and all that stuff, but it's also very cool to have family that I feel has been put into my life for a certain reason or chosen. And then on the flip side, I think it's cool too, to be able to weed out the people. And this happens probably as you get older, like
Totally.
realizing people that are taking up your space and your bandwidth that aren't giving you as much as you're giving them or aren't maybe the right fit anymore. So I think that that's cool too, is that you can change family as your life goes on. It's depending on what you're going through.
Yeah. It can be like a little jellyfish, like it can move and reform in new ways.
Love that. Yeah, exactly.
And so we're talking about what family means to you now at a moment in time when you can look back on the biological family you've created and it's been shaped in the way you wanted it. When you were in the moment of yearning for your son so badly that your marriage was on the rocks and you were going through fertility treatments, do you recall what your vision of family was that you were holding on to and trying for at the time?
Yeah, I really wanted to feel like my heart was complete, if that makes any sense. And I just felt like it
does. Yes, it does.
I talked about that guttural feeling where I was just like, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I just feel like there's another, I don't know if it's like a soul or whatever you believe in, but I just felt like there was this other kid that needed us to be its parents. I don't know. It was just like a feeling. I'm like, believe in like spirituality and signs and the universe and all that stuff. I'm not religious per se, but I do believe in that kind of stuff. And I felt like my heart was telling me something that I really needed to listen to.
I really resonate with that your heart just knows what you need and what you want. And that can be very painful when you can identify what your heart is yearning for and you can't get it.
Totally. And I remember saying to my husband at one point, because I was like, I'm like screwing this up. I'm screwing up we weren't going through this, we would be okay. And it's because of me and my strong desires and my like relentlessness in pursuit of having this baby. And I remember saying to Vince, I wish I didn't want this so badly because I think it would solve a lot of our problems, but I can't not want it. And that was a really hard thing to wrap my head around.
Yeah, actually, my last relationship ended for many reasons, but the ultimate nail in the coffin was that I wanted a second kid. And I was
Wow.
like, I'm just not there with you. And I was like,
Wow. Yeah.
"Nope."
Okay. So you can relate to what I'm saying.
Totally, totally. And it's different in a marriage because it's harder to just be like, peace. It does happen. And yeah, I absolutely get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Tell me about the book. Tell me to take your career full circle from journalism to book writing, but book publishing is huge. Tell me how that came to be.
So I wrote this children's book and I had the title first before I wrote the story. I knew I wanted to write a book called Work of Art because assisted reproductive technology, I thought that was a cool play on words there. And I basically just wrote it one morning and it was about me telling my son, or he overhears me talking to someone about how he was an IVF baby. And then he asked me about that. And it's me explaining to him how he was born. And it touches on my secondary infertility, losses, how much I loved being a mom to my daughter and why I wanted to have another baby. But it's all very palatable for a kid because this is a hardcover children's picture book. So it's ages like 4 to 8, give or take. And we get into it a little bit, but not too much. I basically say, you were born in a lab. And he's like, a superhero? And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And it's cute. It touches on basketball and because he's IVF. I don't know what that is, but I've heard of the MBA. Is it like NBA? That's another 3-letter word. So we get into that. And it's just a cute story that I hope will open up the conversation if families feel like the time is right to talk to their kids about how they were born and how special they are and how wanted they were and they are. And it's a very positive story. And I worked with this really great illustrator, Federico Bonificini, and he's brilliant. And it's very cute. And thankfully, I've started sending some pre-order stuff out and the response has been really good and people are really liking it and the kids are liking it too. I'm just glad it's out in the world and this is going to be a series. So I'm going to do a book about all these different ways to build families through assisted reproductive technology. So stay tuned for more.
Oh my gosh. Talk about going back to that banana condom moment. If you had more of these books as a kid, then you go into your high school classroom a little bit more prepared to have the conversations.
I think so. I mean, I think it's that whole thing of like knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
And or all that stuff. I know Sonny still doesn't, he's 8, so he still doesn't understand the scientific aspect of IVF, but he knows he was born in a cool way and he knows we wanted him really badly. And for now, that's all he needs to know. He's really happy that he's the star of a book and our friends ordered it and he was like, can I sign that one for Will? And I was like, yeah. So he signed that one too, which was fun.
Actually, that brings me to a different question around it. Your daughter, did you have any conversations with her when you were going through fertility to have a second? Were there any concerns like, I'm not enough that my parents want another baby or anything around that?
Not right when it was happening because she was still pretty little. They're 6 years apart now, but when we started, she was probably like 3, 4. So we didn't talk about it then, but now she knows. And the way that I always frame it, which is the way that is true, was that I loved being a mom to her so much. Like she was and is my world that I wanted to do it again. So it wasn't that she wasn't enough. It was that she was the best. And I wanted another one of those. I frame it that way. And I think that she gets it.
That's beautiful. Your family life has changed a bit recently. Are you open to sharing a little bit about? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I lost my mom in October of 2023. And oh no, I'm going to start crying. She was, oh my gosh, she was my biggest cheerleader. Biggest. She listened to every single podcast episode. She went to Fertility Rally Live. Like she'd come to our events and not just work stuff. Like she was just so there for me. I was actually just looking at her texts a couple of nights ago because I still have all of them saved. And every text was like, you're amazing. But it wasn't like she was just blowing smoke. Like she really felt like this about me and my sister and her other stepkids. Her relatives, like family was everything to her. So she felt that way about everybody and just really lifted people up. And tapped into what they were passionate about and supported them. And yeah, it's so weird that she's gone. I think the hardest part is just knowing I'll never be able to talk to her again.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, she hadn't been super healthy for like several years, but it did happen suddenly. She was in the hospital for 13 days and having all these issues. She had COPD and she was an AFib. She had heart rate things going on. And I'm in Jersey and she was local as well. Thankfully, for the past 3 years after my dad died, she moved out here and she was in the hospital. And I actually hadn't gone to see her that day because I was sick. I had a really bad cold. And I think it was just stress because she was in the hospital for 13 days. And I was the main person that was here that was going to visit her and stuff every day. And she's, don't come, be with your kids, get some rest. I'll be fine. And she was going to have this procedure the next morning called a cardioversion where they like shock your heart. I think they put you under anesthesia, but it's a real short procedure. And she was joking. She had a great sense of humor. She was joking about, play Thriller because they're giving me the Michael Jackson drug. Like to put me under, play Thriller tomorrow morning when they do my procedure, and then I'll see you afterwards. And she had sent Vince, my husband, a similar text. Make sure you play Thriller tomorrow morning. I'm going to be on fentanyl or whatever it was. Or maybe not fentanyl, but whatever drug Michael Jackson had been taking. And so I didn't go see her that day. And I was like, I'll see you tomorrow. And we had this thing where we always said everything, the word everything to each other. I stole it from a colleague of mine named David Sheff, wrote this amazing book called Beautiful Boy. And it's about addiction and his son's addiction, but it's also a love story between a parent and a child. And I'm getting choked up. So David Sheff wrote this book and my mom and I read it together when it first came out and like underlined stuff and sent it back and forth. And in the book, David Sheff said, Nick and I say everything to each other. It's, I love you. I'm sorry. I miss you. Like all the jumble of feelings. So my mom and I started saying that to each other every time we talked.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I'm listening to the audio version of Beautiful Boy currently, and it's just as good and poignant and beautiful. So she had texted me, and her last text to me it said everything. And she was supposed to have the procedure in the morning, and then I took some cold medicine and I like went to bed early that night, and I woke up at 4 a.m. and I had 4 missed calls from the hospital, and I was like, shit. And I woke up Vince. I was like, she's dead. And he's no. And I was like, oh yeah. Like, why would the hospital call me like 4 times in the middle of the night? And I can't believe I missed the call. But she had a do not resuscitate, do not intubate order. And when I finally got a hold of somebody, they were like, we're sorry, her heart stopped and she's gone. And I was like, whoa, that was not what I was expecting to happen. But yeah, so it's been intense.
I'm really sorry.
Thank you. I will say, I think that as far as ways to go, I think that was a good way for her to go. And I think she would have been happy about the fact that it was quick. I think I don't know if she was in her sleep. I don't know the details really. I wasn't able to talk to anybody that was in the room with her, which is like a weird non-closure thing, but I'm guessing she was probably awake and her heart just stopped and it was quick. So I'm glad that we didn't have to do in-home care and years of, her mom had Alzheimer's. And I remember her telling me taking care of her mother for those 5 years was the worst experience. It was just so hard on everybody. So I'm glad that we didn't have to go through that with her.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm reflecting on, and I don't know you very well. We've met a couple of times.
I feel like we do though.
But right. And you gave a really beautiful list of adjectives to describe your mom. You said she uplifts and she celebrates and family is everything to her. And she was really great at being a champion for you. And what I found myself hearing was all the adjectives I probably would have used to describe you and the work of Fertility Rally before this podcast interview started.
Making me cry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, but I think you should consider that maybe your work is a way of keeping her alive, if that makes a sense.
Totally. Oh my God. That means a lot. Thank you for saying that.
Has her passing shifted the way in which you think about the work that you're doing or think about how to nurture your family differently or how to take care of yourself differently or anything like that?
I think so. I think I'm still like in a little bit of shock, to be honest with you. But there have been like pockets of clarity and where I've tried to feel like, what's the point of all this? If, you start getting philosophical and, it can be gone in an instant. I think it just, it's helped me realize life is short, as cliche as that sounds. Love the people that you love and tell them that you love them. That's been really important to me because she always did that. And just doing something meaningful. That's another part of the reason that I started the podcast and the rally and writing this book is I was working in magazines for many, many years and it was so fun and I loved it, but I was not helping anyone. I wasn't making a difference by any means. And then I was doing copywriting and I was writing about like cardigan sweaters. And I was like, what is this bullshit? Who cares? So to do something that is a little bit more meaningful, I think really makes a difference. So I think that her passing has just made me hone in on do it now. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. You never know. Love your people, hug your people, and travel. That's my goal for this year. 2024 is travel. I want to travel as much as I can this year.
We've talked about a lot of loss. We've talked about 4 miscarriages. We've talked about an IVF journey. We've talked about losing your mom and how that's shaping what's going on for you right now. And in all that loss, you found a way to create a really nice environment for people to connect and build community and feel less alone through the podcast, through the Wednesday meetings, through the in-person and virtual rallies. If a listener is feeling like really pulled to join your community, how do they get in touch with you? How do they do that?
So for Fertility Rally, they can go to fertilityrally.com, our website, and there's a lot of info there. They can always DM me, my Infertile AF stories, Instagram. It's just me. So you can DM me and I'll talk to you there if you have any questions about what the membership is or if someone wants to try out a support group, because it's not just Wednesday. We have them all throughout the week with different hosts and different slants. We have one for pregnancy after infertility. We have one for motherhood after infertility. We have more general ones as well. We have a West Coast friendly group. So time zones, there's a bunch of different options. But if anyone wants to check one out and see if it's their jam, I'm happy to give somebody the link. They can just DM me and we'll figure that out. So it's basically just, we want to help and support as many people as possible. They can go to the fertilityrally.com website, Infertile AF Stories Instagram, or Fertility Rally Instagram, and it's all right there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So if we want to buy the book, how do we do that?
So the book can be found on my website. I'm self-publishing it. It's infertileafgroup.com/books. And it's all right there. There's a couple different versions. You can do like a personalized copy or you can do a non-personalized copy. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, they feel free to reach out.
That's awesome. It's amazing how much you've been able to do.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your support. It means the world to me. It really does.
Wow, how could you not support your work? Allie, thank you so much for joining Stork'd. It means a lot to have your voice on this podcast.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.